You can stand in the middle of a crowded room and still feel like you're miles away from everyone else. On the surface, you're doing everything right. You're smiling, nodding, and keeping steady eye contact. But internally, there's this nagging feeling that you don't actually belong in the space you're in. Psychology describes this as the outsider phenomenon, a belief that you are fundamentally different from those around you. This isn't just basic introversion or shyness. It is a persistent mental barrier between you and the world. Research suggests this feeling is often triggered by what's called the social monitoring system. This is your brain's internal radar that scans for social cues, tones of voice, and microexpressions. For most people, this system runs quietly in the background, allowing them to simply enjoy the moment. But for the perpetual outsider, this internal radar is over-calibrated and turned up to a deafening volume. Think about the last time you were out and felt like you were narrating your own movements. Instead of enjoying a joke, you're busy calculating the exact second you should laugh or react. When you monitor every interaction this closely, you stop being a participant and become a detached observer. Cognitive psychology calls this a heavy cognitive load, which is the mental strain of overprocessing social data. Because your brain is working so hard to analyze the room, you never actually feel its warmth. You might start to feel like a guest in your own home or a tourist in your own life. This constant vigilance is actually a defense mechanism meant to protect you from the pain of rejection. But the high price of this protection is a total lack of genuine, relaxed intimacy with others. Every time you analyze a conversation instead of feeling it, you unintentionally reinforce that invisible wall. You end up stuck in a paradox where your survival skills are the very thing keeping you alone. To break this cycle, we have to look closer at the heavy emotional weight of the observer's curse. You likely know the feeling of being in a crowd while remaining miles away. It feels like a thick sheet of glass separates you from the rest of the world. You see people laughing and connecting, but you cannot reach that same frequency. Psychology calls this chronic detachment, where you feel mentally separated from your surroundings. You feel more like a guest in your own life than a participant. You adopt a tourist mentality, watching local customs without ever truly belonging. This is just shyness. It is an internal distance that keeps you at arm's length. Picture yourself at a dinner party where everyone is sharing stories and laughing. While they connect, you find yourself analyzing the rhythm and tone of their voices. You notice the way they tilt their heads or the exact moment a joke lands. For you, this isn't a warm connection. It is a complex data collection exercise. It happens because your brain is stuck in a loop of constant self-monitoring. You stop actually feeling the emotion because you are too busy analyzing it. All this watching means you can never truly relax or lower your guard. You stay focused on your posture and your words just to seem normal. This performance leaves you mentally exhausted after even a simple social interaction. You walk away with information about others, but no sense of being known. We have to look back at your history to see where this role began. You might assume you were simply born with a personality that prefers the sidelines. However, that feeling of distance often traces back to how your world first responded to you. Psychology shows that we learn who we are through a process called emotional mirroring. This happens when a parent reflects your feelings back to you with their eyes and voice. When this mirroring is absent, you never learn to trust your own internal signals. Instead of feeling a secure sense of self, you begin scanning the room for clues. Think of a child who feels sad, but sees only a blank face on their parent. To survive, that child must learn to predict the adult's mood just to stay safe. This lack of attunement turns the child into a hyper-vigilant detective of everyone else's emotions. You grow up watching the crowd to find your place instead of feeling it naturally. This creates a glass wall where you are present but feel emotionally invisible. You spend your life translating your inner thoughts into a language others will accept. This builds a performative self that exists only to manage the expectations of others. You end up feeling like an actor forced to stay on stage without a script. Because you are always monitoring the room, you can never truly join the social flow. It leaves you with the haunting belief that you are a stranger in your own life. But this constant effort to bridge the gap leads to a very deep kind of exhaustion. attempting to bridge the gap between yourself and the group comes with a heavy, hidden cost. You might assume everyone else is working just as hard as you are to fit in. But psychology suggests that, for most people, social interaction is actually like a native language. For the outsider, however, every conversation feels like a manual and exhausting process of translation. You are forced to meticulously monitor your tone, your posture, and even your laughter. Imagine being at a crowded party and silently rehearsing your next 3 sentences before you speak. Cognitive psychology calls this social monitoring, which is the constant act of policing your own behavior. This requires a massive cognitive load, meaning your brain uses extra power just to appear normal. You aren't truly living through the moment. You are auditing your own existence in real time. This constant internal friction eventually leads to a deep state of social burnout and fatigue. You start turning down invitations not because you are rude, but because you are utterly spent. The simple idea of being yourself feels impossible when you are always performing a specific role. Eventually, the emotional reward of connection no longer feels worth the massive effort it takes. Isolation begins to feel like a relief because it is the only time you can stop acting. You trade the warmth of the group for the quiet, lonely safety of being alone. This creates a cycle where the less you engage, the more alien the world starts to look. Yet even in your solitude, your mind stays on high alert, watching for the next social threat. Instead of finding peace in your solitude, you often find a state of permanent high alert. Your brain enters a mode called hypervigilance, where it constantly scans your environment for signs of rejection. Psychology calls this social monitoring, which is basically a mental radar that is tuned way too high. You start noticing the tiniest details, like the twitch of an eyebrow or a slight shift in tone. While others see a simple conversation, you see a complex data stream of potential social threats. If a colleague pauses for just a second too long, your mind labels it as active dislike. Research shows that people who feel like outsiders often lose the ability to see neutral cues as safe. Instead, your brain defaults to a threat-first mindset to prevent you from being blindsided by pain. You find yourself searching for the exact moment a social interaction starts to turn sour. This creates a painful feedback loop where you find the very rejection you were already expecting. Because you are so focused on analyzing microexpressions, you stop actually experiencing the present moment. This intense focus makes you feel like a nervous spectator rather than a natural participant in life. You might spend hours dissecting a short text message, convinced there is a hidden, negative meaning inside. This is a form of confirmation bias, where you only notice details that prove you don't belong. You end up reacting to social threats that don't actually exist for anyone else in the room. This hyper-awareness creates a wall of tension that makes it harder for others to connect with you. You become so busy acting as a social detective that you forget how to simply be a friend. You begin to believe your survival depends on this constant, exhausting state of observation. While this vigilance feels like a prison, it also sharpens your perspective in ways others never experience. Being an outsider isn't just a social burden, it is actually a massive hidden advantage. Psychologists call this detached objectivity, which is the rare ability to see facts without social bias. Imagine a workplace where everyone agrees with a bad boss just to avoid standing out. Since you aren't tied to that group identity, your brain stays focused on the actual reality. This immunity to social pressure allows you to spot fatal mistakes before they turn into disasters. You become the person who sees the truth while everyone else is just chasing a trend. Research shows that social distance actually sharpens your ability to see the bigger picture. You can solve complex problems better because you aren't distracted by the need to please people. This habit of constant observation eventually turns you into a highly independent thinker. You don't just accept the standard way of doing things because everyone else does. Instead, you develop a unique voice that offers the world a perspective it desperately needs. This unique perspective makes you an incredible bridge between different groups and cultures. You can walk into a new environment and decode its hidden rules almost instantly. That skill makes you a natural strategist and a sharp judge of human character. You might feel like a permanent guest, But that makes you a master at reading the room. Look at the great artists and inventors who were lifelong misfits in their own time. Their isolation wasn't a failure, it was the space they needed to build a vision. When you stop fighting the distance, you can finally use your vantage point as a strength. Accepting your role as an observer allows you to finally find your own place in the world. For years, you might have tried to close the gap between yourself and everyone else. It is easy to think that if you just memorized the right social script, you would finally belong. But psychology shows us there is a profound difference between fitting in and truly belonging. Fitting in is just a survival strategy where you change yourself so a group will accept you. It relies on high self-monitoring, which means you are constantly checking your behavior against the crowd. This constant performance often leaves you feeling like a fraud rather than a real member. By prioritizing the group's approval, you are secretly teaching yourself that your true self is not safe. True belonging, however, is the practice of being your authentic self, even when it feels risky. You start to build internal safety when you stop treating your observer status like a defect. You can finally accept that your unique vantage point is a valid way to experience the world. You do not need to be at the center of the crowd to live a meaningful life. The real goal is to stop seeing that glass wall as proof that you are broken. When you stop looking for external permission, the exhausting need to read every room starts to fade. You begin to find a sense of home within your own thoughts and your own values. Ultimately, belonging is not a place you find, but a peace you create within yourself.